Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined with my co host, Greg, and it is October,
hmm
which means only one thing on our show. What is
What is
that,
that,
Greg?
Dave?
Oh,
Oh,
it means
well, I'll
creepy
tell you what it means.
episodes, right?
Spooky season is officially upon us, and I know this is your favorite time of year. It
Of course.
certainly is a piece of my favorite time of year. The October, November, December run is great. And Dave, I think we should just it's probably so much that we should probably just get right into this in a sense, right?
This is a very packed episode of information. And as we always do with this type of episode, true crime,
Mm,
we will say we are not experts in true crime. We have
try anything.
interest, ranging interest in various parts of the true crime, but we in no way, shape, or form are going to dig super deep or focus super hard on the details of the true crime, which you can hear on any true crime podcast. Instead,
Yes.
we want to focus more on the psychological aspects of it, the age old questions that we always come to, nature versus nurture, all that good stuff. And
There is sort of a Frankenstein element here, and we can kind of get into that
and
later.
some pop culture relevancy, which this one has so much influence in
Yeah,
the world.
I'm glad you mentioned that, right? So because if you're even the most casual horror fan, you've obviously know the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know Psycho, you know Silence of the Lambs, and these are just examples of the influence that this one,
Yeah.
mama's boy had on this genre. It's wild when you think of you don't hear this name Ed Gein so much, but now you do because they have that handsome fella in the show that Dave and I watched the first episode of.
Yep.
But it's just wild to think of it. That's those are three major examples, but I mean across the board, it's the influence is everywhere.
Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't name a show after him called Silence of the Limbs, because that would be very relevant to him. And also, like, we had actually planned for this originally to be released before the monster, the Ed Gain story on Netflix, but unfortunately, I did the math incorrectly, and it
That's
is
okay. And
coming out
what you
after
we've been talking about this episode for I don't know
a
since we
while.
started this
Yeah, for
thing.
a while.
Yeah, and it's just such an interesting subject, but I don't know. Now it's getting its attention for better or for worse
Right.
sometimes.
I actually think that this is an interesting, the way we're going to cover this, I think will make the show more interesting, because the big issue, and I was explaining this to Greg, the reviews are very mixed right now on the show, because there's those people that want it factual true crime. But you
Mhm.
have to understand the makers of this are the same people who make like American Horror Story and, all those types of shows. So they're actually just looking to make something gruesome and entertaining versus a fact-based show. But there are definitely things in there that are, in the Ed Gein lore.
Right.
But I think you're going to find a lot of, like, at least from episode one, some of the psychology is definitely there. They definitely caught some things that influence him psychologically, and we're going to cover that. So with no further ado, I guess we should get into this.
Okay, Dave, and one of these questions, besides just the simple question of why, it's a good question. Why do all this? Why commit these murders, these two murders, that we know of? And the other is when I talked about the little bit of a Frankenstein element, who is the real monster here? So I think it would be interesting to first, I'll get into Ed Gein's mother, and then Dave can kind of take over on Gein himself for a while. So Ed Gein's mother is this old German Lutheran, and right there, I mean, I don't want to like stereotype, but Natasha, the person I've been in a relationship for years and years
Yeah.
now, 10 years, is German, and you can see it. You can sense it. You know what I mean? There's
Jeez.
some strict like undertones there sometimes,
Oh,
right?
would you say like rule follower,
Very much. Rule
very
follower,
rigid thinking?
rigid.
Yeah.
Yeah, rigid thinking. Not frigid, but rigid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Two very different things. So, and her name was Augusta. So,
Augusta.
and she was the child of German immigrants and a part of the whole Lutheran exodus from Prussia in the mid 19th century. Not super important. But what is important is those strict religious beliefs. So, Augusta was raised in the environment where she was taught that every deed was tainted with sin and like all
Mm,
humanity was deserving damnation, almost like a Puritan like sort of philosophy.
right.
And this deep-seated belief in human depravity became like the cornerstone of her life. That's all she would think about people. People are inherently bad. That's her
They're
worldview.
inherently bad. And
Inherently bad.
is that what she was taught or started to observe because they don't follow her strict religious
That's what she
beliefs?
was taught. Like you start off bad. Like you are inherently bad and you're just seeking some kind of salvation. That's
Yeah,
it. It is very much like the Puritans, even more so.
sure. That's such an interesting way to look at things.
No. I know.
It's
When
the exact
I tend
opposite
to
of
think like
us.
we're all good.
Right.
I mean, not all good, but we have the propensity for evil,
Yes.
obviously. But
Sure.
I think that like I don't know. It is a nature versus nurture thing that we can get into later. So Augusta herself, her people hurt people. We know that. So abusive parenting, of course. In Harold Schechter, he wrote this book called Deviant, and he writes that Augusta's father was this strict disciplinarian who beats his children for any kind of stepping out of line, any kind of infraction, right? So this abusive parenting contributes obviously to how Augusta is going to raise her own sons. And she did have two sons. We you only hear about the one,
Right.
right? So
She
she's
was very distant to her first son. Henry?
yeah,
Is
and
that his name?
probably for the better for Henry.
Mm, maybe.
Maybe? Okay.
Because of his, his outcome. But um yeah, very just so she wanted a girl, right? And she
Hmm.
got two boys.
Right.
And
Shit.
when
Shit.
she had the first one, she was just so distant from him and gave him no attention. So yeah, you're right. I guess in a different world, like outcome, it could have been for the better because he actually had a chance, right?
Yeah.
But then when Ed arrives, she accepts, I guess, that this is just what God has given me
Yeah.
and
Like
decides to
begrudgingly.
instill, yeah, and decides to instill her parenting style on him versus the very distant parenting she did on her first one.
So her parenting style, it's a good sort of transition here. Like her father, she has this strong sense of disgust for every single person in the world, like the immorality in the world, like looking outside being like, wow, this whole place is damned, right? And so she attempts to isolate her sons from any influence that could be put on them, any friends, anything really, any school, none of that. She's going to keep them away from all of it. And so
Girls,
girls,
no
yeah, which is
girls.
so it's like you're putting like isolating them and driving them against their nature, which is going to have its issues and like
They're
built up confusion.
she it's funny, she wants a girl, but her views towards women are horrendous.
I
Is
know.
it because she's so angry she didn't have a girl of her own? Or is
I
she
think a
just
part of it is because she probably, like a normal girl, felt these sexual impulses and these desires and all these things, and was taught for so long that that natural instinct of hers is evil, and not to embrace that, that she just like is like stay away from them because they'll damn you.
she
They've got this
projects her
crook.
own self-loathing onto every woman in the world.
Hmm.
Every woman is a harlot or
Hmm. And every
charlatan.
man is just someone waiting to take advantage of them.
Wow.
Yeah. So she meets Philip Gein. When she's 19 years old, he's 24. So she marries him in 1899, just before the turn of the century. And despite her hate for him, because he drinks, he's lazy, she has to stay married to him because she's, opposed to divorce. So she's stuck with this guy. And you can imagine Philip. I mean, what came first, the chicken or the egg? He's a drunk and he's lazy, but like, is that because he married Augusta?
Right.
You know?
Is it George or Philip?
George Philip Gein.
George Philip. Okay.
Yeah. I just maybe they call him Phil. So she takes control of the household. She's very domineering, and she imposes her strict religious beliefs on her whole family, like this moral
Yeah.
contempt on her whole family. And it
She,
seems like
she
George is able to push back a little bit, but the boys are done.
very little though. Like
Yeah.
she definitely found an individual, and from what I understand, he had the lowest self-esteem you could have. So she found someone who she was able to dominate, if that makes sense,
So I
because
just
of
can,
his lack of self-worth.
yeah, when I was thinking about this, I kept thinking like, so back to Frigid and Rigid, who Augusta is, like, George at some points obviously was trying to like, you know, have an intimate relationship with her. They had two sons, and can you imagine what it must have been like? Like you're disgusting, like during, after, like the shame and like
Yeah.
just I can only imagine what it was like to be married to Augusta.
And yeah, so it makes sense that she found someone who already had low self-worth,
Mhm.
and it was easy to continue that low self-worth by just giving him that negative reinforcement over and over. So he just is totally depleted, and he already had a drinking problem. Well, guess what? It's definitely not going to get
It's
better.
definitely not getting any better. And the boys are watching this relationship and seeing who like seeing the power, where the power lies, and she's very controlling and isolating. She, like you said, she's the undisputed head of the household, and to protect her sons from immorality, she keeps them like they're in Plainfield, Wisconsin, on a farm, and she doesn't want them to make friends, and they certainly don't want to be in relationships. Again, the religious aspect is there, constantly preaching about, the evils of promiscuous women. And she views her husband, George, as lazy,
Yeah,
and she abused him.
right.
So she subjected her sons to strict, like religious tirades. You can imagine she's going on and on and on about the evils of the world, and she subjects her own husband to that. And then from a very young age, she's telling them, listen, you're all determined to be dragged to hell. It's not gonna work out for you. But she does develop this complicated, strange bond with Ed. So despite being so cruel, Ed develops this obsessive, strange attachment to her. And his father dies in 1940, and his brother in
Rest his
1944.
soul.
Yes.
Bless that poor man.
Bless them both, right? I mean, holy shit. I mean, how old was the father and the brother die in like near succession, and Ed becomes the sole companion and caretaker, which is a strange place to be in, right?
Yeah. But
1945.
it's
No,
interesting
go
because
ahead.
like you said, it's isolating, right? And this is the only people in Ed's world, as far as we know. It's like his main core base. It's these three individuals, and he
Hmm.
loses two of them,
Right.
and that brings him as head of the household, as you said. And I think not to reference the show at all, because it is a work of fiction. I think while loosely based on fact, it is a work of fiction, I believe. um it is interesting. They kind of pose the idea of like, was that maybe desired on Ed's end to become because of that twisted relationship with his mom? That was an interesting question. I think they pose, or kind of like display for you to like mull over. Could
Like
that have been
whether
a
or not he
desirable
was
thing?
he was hoping to be just have her all to himself.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's funny because like in 1945 she has a stroke, and he's like a caretaker, and then she passes away that same year. So now it's Ed, who is taught to be isolated, who is kept from everything, is on his own. So he's devastated, obviously.
Yeah.
And he felt like this when the investigators talked to him after, like he felt like a force inside of him take up like almost a sense of his mother. He devotes this like weird shrine to her memory. Like um what do they call it? Like he sets like certain parts of the house where she was in just and keeps it completely the
So
same.
her bedroom, I believe it
Yeah.
was basically blocked off. And when police raided his house, which we'll get into, um, they opened a door and it looked untouched. Whereas the rest of the house basically looked like a hoarder's house, filled with trash, decay, debris everywhere. Her room was untouched.
So the house though in the disarray that it was in does suggest some kind of, I mean, we're just kind of laying the groundwork here, but like some kind of disorder, some kind
Sure.
of, lack of insight. He's
I think
childlike.
he was depressed with anxiety. I think that was,
That's what it was?
yeah,
Oh
that was
man,
it.
we're all in trouble. Yeah, I mean it's very like the isolation is something that I think I keep coming back to because it's, you can have this strange, unusual behavior, and if it's unchecked, if that's not getting bounced off somebody, then it just kind of keeps compiling onto itself. Like you have
Yeah.
no sort of compass or guidelines on like what is like it's not
He
governed.
lost the person who basically told him how to live his life.
And the base person telling him how to live his life wasn't exactly giving him the best insight.
No, but at least she kept him in check, I guess.
Yeah, she kept the place
Right?
clean, I can
She kept the
imagine.
house clean. She told him how to live his life, and she heavily influenced his ability to stay away from, those demons, right?
Yeah.
So when she was gone, he no longer had that influence and kind of gave in to some of his demons, the things that his mom always warned him, like that he was probably capable of, or that
Hmm.
men are capable of. He kind of gave into them and significantly more. Interesting thing, just to kind of go into the like play into the psychology a little bit. There was something that later on Ed noted as like impactful in his reasoning, like when he was trying to come up with the reason of why he did what he did and all that stuff. And this, Greg, I'm sure you're aware of this story, the puppy killing.
Yes.
So they go to an individual's home to collect money that's owed or something like that. And as they get there, the man that they were going to see was storming out of the house with a puppy in hand, and there's a woman crying and chasing after him, following behind. And this woman, he was not married to this woman. So in Augusta's eyes, this is the biggest sin, right? He's laying and he's in home with a unmarried woman, and he's about to kill a puppy, but Augusta's losing it about the sin that's being committed by this harlot, right? This terrible woman and this man giving into sin by being with her. And she just starts losing it on them, screaming. And meanwhile, a puppy's being murdered, and she could care less.
Yeah, that's so strange and that's so confusing for a kid who probably has the impulse. It's probably a natural impulse not to hurt something so vulnerable.
Right. But all Ed can hear is what his mom's saying about the woman and the man committing the sin. And that's the only thing that makes an impact on him. And then his mom has a stroke that ends up being the death of her. That
Yeah.
was the second stroke she had.
Yeah.
Um,
She's always so worked up.
yeah, so she has that stroke, and then he attributes the stroke to the sins of these people. The woman who's, committing this sin, this man who's laying with an unmarried woman, all that stuff. That's all that impacts him from this situation. And I mean, the puppy part of it is just like icing on the cake, because it's like this thing that would upset so many of us, and he's not even bothered, and nobody even notices it. That's just like this crazy
I know.
scenario.
And
But
it's like to me like another thing I'm thinking about is like so he is like, "Oh my God, this is these sins are affecting my mother so much. This person, this only person, like he's got a complicated relationship with love. You got to understand that
yeah,
this is all he knows. This is his connection to this is his safety net. This is
basically they
his
killed his
whole entire
mom.
world."
Sin killed
Right.
his mom.
Right. So he says, "Oh my God, like I have those same impulses and desires within me. How do I be strong enough to fight those? The only person strong enough I know to fight those is my mother. So maybe to fight those and honor my mother, I have to become my mother." Yikes. In a sense, that's just one
Sure.
theory. I mean, that
Or it's like some sort of like avenging his mother
mhm.
in some way
Or
by
even like, yes, avenging his mother or like becoming someone different so that he can play out his fantasies
sure.
and it's not him. I don't know, just
There
like,
was, because there is some thought that some of the women that he is it did kill or was thought to kill look like his mother or
absolutely.
remind him of his mother,
Say
but
like
they're not his
50s,
mother.
mid
There's
50s, right? Mid to
sure,
late 50s. Also that like so at the same time he's destroying his mother by killing these women and bringing his mother back in sort of a
yeah.
safe way.
Well, and I
It's
was also curious if like, so they're his mother, but they're not his mother, right?
mhm.
They're like sin versions of his mother. So is he like killing these evil versions of his mother or something along those lines? There's so many, and that's the thing. We'll never know the full scope of his thought process. So it is always going to be a mystery.
So let's get into a little bit more of the psychology of this stuff. So you mentioned before the Oedipus complex. You didn't say Oedipus complex, but you did say if you know Greek tragedy and Greek myth, like we don't have to get into it, but Oedipus, killed his father and married his mother. So like it was this going on. There's a very Freudian. So Freud plays, that's a Freud thing. Also, a Freud thing is the devouring mother and how damaging that can be when you kind of don't let your son or your daughters into the world to kind of like make their own decisions and failures.
Sure.
That's happening. Good call, Freud, on this. I mean, he would have been all over this. Desire to become his mother. So he told investigators that his this like conflicted connection with his mom made him want to be more like a woman. And after digging up his body, he began like robbing other graves to get like more parts to construct this woman's suit and to maybe to recreate the existence of his mom. Maybe
Right.
we're not really sure, but like one another theory suggests that Gein's actions were driven by a desire to both bring his mother back to life and to destroy her because of you can think of the amount of frustration that he's going through, just sexual frustration
Right.
as a man coming into, I mean, a young man, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He's
also
totally repressed of his sexual
repressed,
desires.
absolutely repressed, which is, when I was growing up, they would say that about like Catholic schoolgirls. Watch out for them because they go the other way quick. You know what I mean? Or whatever, right? Like this repression always kind of like it's like pulling an elastic back and then just letting it rip. I don't know if that's true, but it seems to be in some extreme cases. Augusta's intense religious beliefs also sort and like disgust towards women in general and sex were put into Ed's mind at a very young age, and the emotional abuse and the verbal abuse from like his own misogynistic views, right? Like I hate women so much. He maybe it was as simple as that. Maybe that was enough to have like enough hatred for women, and these are the women that he had access to kind of, I don't know, kill women, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's one more thing to get into here, and it's going to be about the delusions. And I think the main delusion for Ed is he's trying to bring his deceased mother back to life or to become her. That's like resurrecting her, I think is like sort of his main delusion. So you can see that in a few ways. You can see the shrine to his mother. He preserves
Mhm.
her bedroom. You talked about that. That's like a physical manifestation of his refusal to accept that she's gone. He keeps that alive. Creating a woman's suit. Okay, so this his delusion begins to evolve into like this weird obsession that creating a woman's suit, and by wearing it, he believes he could like inhabit her identity and her essence and like attempt to bring her back to life with his own life and her maybe skin, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to fulfill like the rest of this delusion, he begins robbing graves and targeting, women, I guess, who sort of resemble his mother. So like
Yeah.
kind of like a Frankenstein sort of grave robbing thing going here. And this is something that you see a lot in the hospital too, where like
Grave
you
robbing.
have people well, not
Great.
this exactly, but like when you're gonna keep someone against their will, it's like, are they acting based on their delusions, and are their delusions presenting imminent risk to themselves or other people? So if you hear a guy and he's like, yeah, I'm just trying to like if I can just rebuild my mother and kind of wear her suit, then I can kind of bring light into the world and be a better version of myself and maybe make the world a better place. You'd start being like, okay, this is kind of intense. And I'm just going to mention one more thing about how some of this stuff was manifesting. So he had schizophrenia. So a hallmark of schizophrenia is going to be like the hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and delusions. We've got all that going on for sure. So we're assuming that after his mother's death, he was hearing his mother's voice,
Right.
possibly commanding him to like find a replacement for her, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he was trying to, fill some kind of void because his mother died, and the voices and hallucinations, were coming from his sense of, I don't know, loneliness and he's alone. He's really alone in the world. He's been isolated his whole life. She was his only sort of interaction. So like he needed to fill this kind of void. So maybe as like a protective or an adaptive response, his body or his mind created these voices as a sense of like company, because we all need human interaction, right? I mean, that's why children develop imaginary friends and things like that, so they don't have to exist in isolation because no one can really do that successfully. And the instructions, based on his delusions, probably kind of, in his mother's voice, maybe became more and more, I don't know, detailed. And this kind of led him on this path, and he's got this altered sense of reality because he's got his hallucinations, he's got his delusions, he's got his isolation, and
Mhm.
all these things put together create a perfect storm for this guy to just wreak havoc, you know?
Yeah. So, you mentioned that it's thought that he heard voices, but he never mentions anything like that.
He does mention it, but you can only so you're, like anything else, mental health or psychological, it's just self-report. So the things that when you're the information we have from that is this is coming from a time they're trying to build a case against him too, and he
Yeah.
did end up getting the insanity plea, and he ended up spending his time not in prison but in
Which was
uh
a big deal.
it's a big deal. Yeah.
Not even like, so for them to actually take steps to identify that there's something mentally not right with this person was bold on their end because people wanted action. They didn't want to think that this man was going to get treated well. They didn't want to think that this man could end up released at some point if he got better.
Yeah.
They wanted him put away and maybe worse, right?
Of course. And with the nature of the crimes, I probably would have been feeling the same way.
Yeah, so I mean this step to like actually, you know, plead for insanity, but for them to hear that and actually move forward with, feeling like this guy doesn't need help, which there are so many reports of like people that met with him and they walked away saying he needs a lot of help. That was the message. It wasn't like, oh, I think he's a nice guy, or
Mhm.
or like, he's a devil or something. It was like he needs a lot of help. So just
So
by
Dave,
talking to him.
is this an important, like maybe the right time to kind of mention, like, because you're kind of hinting at something, and I think like the way I was just describing how like he had this delusional
Yeah.
belief, and these beliefs are reinforced by hallucinations in the form of his mother's voice, which is making them powerful, and then like that the behavior based on the delusions and the command hallucinations amplifies his state of psychosis. And there's one sort of element that you can kind of add to this that make would make it even more dangerous if so you've got impulsivity, you've got delusions, you got hallucinations, delusional thinking, isolation, and are you going to add like a lack of insight onto this on some form?
So yes, I'm glad you're kind of leading
Yeah.
me to
Yeah.
this direction here, because this is something I we talked about right before we got on, and I've this has been the lingering question in my mind.
Yeah.
Why is nobody kind of saying the thing that seems most obvious to me? This man seems like he has an intellectual disability.
Hmm.
Like, there's no, whether it's the portrayals that we're seeing of him, whether it's the way he's described, his mannerisms, his presence, his oddness that
Hmm.
everybody picks up. He just seems like an individual who clearly has an intellectual disability and lacks a lot of like maybe basic social skills. Um, he also, no, the other thing that was interesting to me, he seems to lack empathy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that made me wonder because, and like it's hard when you're,
I know you
especially
don't want
when
to
you're in
say
the,
it.
well, when you're in this field, it's hard not to
Yeah.
like also relate it to other people that you've known that had
Hmm.
similar characteristics or other diagnoses that you're aware of. But like I worked with an individual who had traumatic brain injury, and the part of his brain that was affected by it seemed to be the part of the brain that was able to like grasp and demonstrate empathy. So
Hmm.
he basically lacked empathy,
What about
any
like
form of
the
it.
growth on his eye? Is that like going further
Well,
back into his
that's a
brain?
question too. I mean, he has that growth on his eye that causes his eye to be droopy, and you wonder, what was that all about?
Hmm.
And here's another thing that we talked about off air. It just seems like a lot of lack of resources in the town that they're in maybe even in like medical. I mean, we're talking about obviously a time where maybe that was you know, a little different than now. Things would be taken care of a little differently. But like even identifying bodies here, like some of that stuff was not done. Like there was a lot of information that could have probably been gathered to link him to more murders, but it just wasn't done because maybe they didn't have the resources, the money to do so, the time. And I also wonder if it would have actually brought any like comfort to the families.
Right.
It's probably better off that they just go missing than be discovered to be in his house as
Yeah.
the chair,
I mean,
you
yeah.
know. So yeah, there's so much here that like we don't know. But I mean, I can't help but to think of Ed as an individual who's got some kind of developmental disability, I should
Hmm.
say. I said intellectual, but just like developmental disability
Either way,
would be the
really.
best thing I can think of. And that would also explain why he's so influenced, because I think that a lot of the things that he demonstrates are things that, are modeled or told to
Mhm.
him. And like he seems almost uh like has no free thinking in
Well,
some
I mean, you got
ways.
to think of the isolation too.
The isolation plays a big piece of it
It
for
plays a
sure.
big role in it because your mom's telling you all this stuff. Like I know that like I've been around friends, when you're like a little kid, maybe you learn something. For whatever reason it comes to my mind like sexual stuff. And there was things like I don't want to get crass, so maybe I shouldn't. But say you thought you knew what a sexual act was supposed to
Sure.
be,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then you
And
find
then
out it's
like you
different.
hear like your friends talking about it and you're like, "Ooh, that's not what I thought that was."
Right.
You know what I mean? And,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
"Oh, wow, okay." So like had I been isolated, I could have really
But
embarrassed the
you
hell out of
but here's
myself.
the thing that you have that Ed seemed to lack. You would hear the different explanation for it and be able to accept a new meaning and adapt to the new meaning of it and
Right.
move on. Ed doesn't seem to be able to do that. He has his thinking about the things based on. So, all right, for example, him and his brother, very different views of their mom. And Ed was unable to hear or see the things that his brother was saying to him about their upbringing, about their mom. And like, it was like, no, my way of thinking, it's like he only had one way of thinking and it
Hmm.
couldn't be swayed. He couldn't hear other people's perspectives. It was just my way. I mean, which Augustus seems to be that way as well, but
Yeah.
he seems like even more
Well,
extreme than
if
Augustus.
the show's not going to explain it or no one else is like, what? Just can you give us like a little tiny bit of what the brother's thoughts of the mother were?
Yeah, like the brother dislikes the mom. He feels like he sees the abuse. He
Hmm.
sees the and here's another part of this. There is speculation that Ed may have killed his brother. And that may be because one of two things. And I think the show kind of alludes to maybe it's because the brother was going to leave them to go get married. But there's also just the idea that maybe it was because of the brother saying things about the mother that Ed did not like, and he became enraged. I don't know that I believe it to be intentional because he does sound like Ed actually loved his brother.
Hmm.
But he didn't love his brother as much as he loved his mom. Let's just put it that way, right? And he did try to hide the murder of his brother. The speculation is by there was like some brush fire they were supposedly doing, and he said that the brother passed away there, but there was bruising or
Hmm.
some sort of signs that it was not the fire caused
It,
by the fire, but they labeled it as asphyxiation, I think, or
yeah.
suffocation. But the
It
the
made me
signs
think of
point
like Cain and Abel, like maybe like even thinking about like that, like maybe justifying his actions, or maybe his mom put him
yeah.
on. Who
Here's another
knows?
sign that maybe there's some kind of developmental disability going on. Ed said a lot of things and did a lot of things that made him very obvious that he was doing things that were wrong.
Yeah.
And people didn't think they didn't put any seriousness to anything. And like, all right, so his brother's discovered to have markings that like don't prove that this was done by fire, but they just kind of like chalk it up to like, oh, well, you know,
Yeah.
they just don't think he's capable. He's a small man. He's not like a huge looming, like actually, in the show, his physique is probably nothing like that of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
actor.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
definitely tried to like pretty it up, and like put someone in there that's going to be eye candy for people
What? Yeah,
versus
why
like
is
what
it
the
always
real
that
Ed.
way? Like,
I don't
why is
know.
it like
That I think that's
Dahmer
I
and Ed Gein
I think that's
attractive?
I think that's the problem people have with these shows is it does feel like they're like making these people that did these like really sick things sexy.
Mm.
And that is kind of problematic. I mean, I watch it, it's entertainment, but it's like if I had some connection to these things, I'd probably be a little upset about that.
I know I'm watching it. I'm like, this dude's sexy.
I know you couldn't stop saying it. Um, so yeah, there's a lot here. And he actually said things about one of the women that was missing, pretty much saying that she was at his house. And nobody really took it seriously. So he said a lot of things and
hmm
nobody took him seriously, which makes me think there is something about Ed that people didn't
Yeah.
take seriously.
They're like,
And
shut
that
up, Ed.
usually means something.
You know, it's like the small town, like, shut up, Ed.
Yes. All right. So you know who he reminded me of? I just
I know
think
who you
of
remind me of.
have you seen the movie Lawnmower Man?
Yes, of course I have.
Job, is that his name?
Yes.
He's like the
Lawnmower Man's
disabled guy.
great. Yeah.
He's the disabled guy in the neighborhood that does like, and
Unassuming.
that's what Ed reminds me of.
Yeah, he reminded me. There's this movie, Banshees of something,
Ira.
Immersion,
Yeah, 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 no,
some
I've seen it. I've seen
some
it
like
with
Irish
Colin
name.
Farrell, right?
Yes, and there's like like a guy who's in it who's not supposed to be like super slow, but he's a little bit like it's a tiny bit of intellectual deficits
Yes.
there,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you're like he's very unassuming, but at the same time you're like, ooh, I don't know, like there's something just because it's the lack of insight and the impulsivity and like the
Barry Keegan, I think, is the actor that you're talking
yes,
about. Yeah.
yes, yes, it is. It's got something. The look, you know?
Yeah, no, he for sure does. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So getting even more into some of the influences. So Ed becomes fascinated with these like pulp fiction stories about Nazi atrocities, but specifically about this concentration camp commander's wife, Ilse Koch, I think is her name.
hmm
But she's also known as the bitch of Buchenwald.
Yep.
And she's this horrendous figure who becomes like highly sexualized, right? And in these like pulp fiction magazines, and she's kind of known for like her cruelty towards the individuals in the
Yeah. Of
concentration camps,
course.
um and the use of human skin for household items, which we know.
Yeah, he
uh,
would borrow that a little bit.
yeah, right. um so yeah, he becomes really intrigued, curious about like Nazi concentration camps in general, it sounds like, but especially this, which is like this perfect blend of violence and sex and like female dominatrix
Mm.
style. Like, yeah, like think
It's
about
weird. Like,
his
do you think
mom.
that maybe on some level he's like, I can get my sexual frustrations out by, it's almost like a Dexter thing.
Yeah,
Like, you know how he's like killing for good? Maybe he's
right.
like getting his sexual frustrations out and like this like repressed whatever it is out by hurting people who deserve to be hurt kind of thing. Maybe he
So do
likes
you
that.
think he was seeing
Which
it?
which which according to his mom was everybody.
Right. Do you think he was against the Jewish?
No, well,
I don't know. There's nothing that really says either
nah,
way if he had any like political standpoint. I don't
yeah.
think he did. I think he took it for like face value. But I
Well,
mean,
look. One time we did an episode on like hidden people, which was a great episode, and people should check it out. But there was that woman, Blanche Monnier, who was isolated in their room for 25 years, and her, sexual. She became like sexually. She would have orgasms when being around like feces because that's all she was around,
right.
right? So it's like maybe like he's going to have these sexual desires, and they're going to come out some way, and there's like the lines get crossed, the wire gets crossed. They have to be released in some way. And is it just connected? Does it become connected to like this sadism and this hurting people who deserve to be hurt? Is this where how it comes out? Because you remember, like he think about the puppy, think about all these things. He's got this confused sense of morality too. Like what
Sure.
is right and what's wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. So this, I mean, like I said about this woman, I mean, there's not much more that I need to go into here, but aside from the thing I already mentioned, she was also known for things like lampshades
hmm
and just using skin of murdered tattooed inmates. And none of this stuff is actually like proven in court, but the stories of them were widely reported, and he has reportedly been like reading all these and about these war crimes, and it really seemed to have like an influence on him.
Hmm.
So, all right, let's get into the crimes. We have two that he's actually admitted to, which is bonkers because when we think of Ed Gein, we think of all these atrocities, but there's only two that he's actually admitted to, which is an interesting thing because like why not
Hmm.
to admit to everything? But he admits to the murder of we have Mary Hogan, who was a 54-year-old who vanished in December of 1954, and the second was 58-year-old Bernice Warden, who went missing from her hardware store in Plainfield on November 16th in 1957. The first one, Hogan, operated a tavern frequently visited by Gein in Pine Grove, Wisconsin, and it was discovered what happened to her was discovered almost 3 years later. But Bernice was the one that really got him in trouble. He shot her in her hardware store, but there was a trail of blood that led outside to where a truck had been, and the cash register was missing. Now, they were able to put this together because her son, Frank Warden, who was a deputy sheriff, immediately suspected Gein and quickly found him at the neighbor's house. The reason why he suspected that it was Gein was two things. Gein had said, I guess the day prior, he was going to be picking up some antifreeze, and they found the receipt for the antifreeze there. The other thing is they were able to put some of these things together. Gein had actually asked if the son was going to be out going hunting the next day. So he was like almost like anticipating, like, is she going to be alone or not? So
Hmm.
this one definitely seemed like it was pre-planned. He was
Yeah, and
starting
does
to
that
set, and he brought the bullets for the gun that was in the store, asked her if he could see the gun. She didn't think otherwise. He loaded it when she had her back turned and shot her.
so does this poke any holes in your opinion, like the intellectual disability, the developmental disability thing, the ability to kind of plan this?
Not really. I mean, it's not like
It's not the most elaborate plan in the
right,
world.
right. I mean, these are details that maybe seems more sophisticated than the way we're even viewing Geen at this
Mhm.
point, but it's not like crazy details that like, oh, you're going to be going hunting. Great. She's going to be alone. And I see that there's a shotgun on the wall and I have bullets to that. I mean, yeah, it's not the most sophisticated planning, but it is, I guess it is a little more sophisticated than how we're seeing him at this point. Um, so they find him at the neighbor's house and they go to the Guillen property at night. And this is where this whole story becomes the most disturbing story you will ever hear in your life. Um, when they go at night, and this is creepy to even think that they had to do this at night
Hmm.
because it's very dark in there. They they stumble into this place that's totally just hoarder central, um, trash everywhere. And as they're stumbling along, they find Bernice's decapitated body in a shed, hung up outside, upside down by her legs with a crossbar at the ankles and ropes at her wrists to secure her. And if I understand correctly, he actually like hooked in things into like her Achilles heel or something somewhere around there to like secure her on the crossbar. So it's like
Oh
really
my
rigged
God.
her up there.
Yeah.
And the torso had been, and this is going to get very graphic, and I'm going to try my best to like gloss over this. So if
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't want to hear this, just skip forward a little bit. But the torso had been dressed out like a deer, basically disemboweled, all the
Hmm.
organs taken out. As I said, she was shot with a 22 caliber rifle in the store. So all these mutilations were made after her death. So he's playing with people's bodies after the death, which we already know of Gain at this point. Um, so he's pretty much living in this like hoarder situation, like I said, trash everywhere. But beyond the trash, they found an unimaginable amount of human body parts, some made up as household items or preserved in jars. The household item thing, like I said, it really seems like it's heavily influenced on that Nazi concentration camp commander's wife. But here's a list of some of the things they found: whole human bones and fragments, a waste bucket made of human skin covering several chairs,
Hmm.
human skulls mounted on bedposts, female skulls, some with the top sewn off, bowls made of human skulls. So he was actually eating out of human skulls, a corset made from a human female torso, skin from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from skin of female heads. They found Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag and her skull in a box. They found Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, and her heart was in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove. They found 9 vulva in a shoebox.
Hmm.
They found a young girl's dress and the vulva of 2 females judged to have been about 15 years old. A belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from skin of a human face, and fingernails from female fingers. This
That's
is
crazy.
absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting. He was literally playing with these things and creating things. So,
Living amongst it, just like
like
living as
nothing,
normal. Yeah.
preserving these things too. He was looking for different ways to, I think, with, not to be crass, but like with the vulva, like they found like different, like one was covered in like salt. So he was like trying to find ways to preserve them.
Yeah.
Um, he had tried creating shrunken heads. Which is like bizarre, but that's something that he had read. Because he was really big into like fantasy stuff, especially like stuff with like different tribes and things like that. So like the shrunken head idea really resonated with him. There's actually a 16-year-old youth whose parents were friends with Gein, and he reported that Gein had shrunken heads at his house, which he described as relics sent by a cousin who served in the Philippines during World War II. Um, when they investigated his house, they found that these were actually just human facial skins carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks. So they weren't actually shrunken heads. The grave robbing thing. So from 1947 to 1952, Gein told investigators that he made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume bodies while he was in like a daze-like state. So this is something he starts to tell people, that he would get like overcome with like this feeling, and sometimes he'd have to pray himself out of it. He states that like actually there were times where he would start digging a grave and suddenly snap out of it, and he would just leave empty-handed. So almost like there was something, going on with him that was
Yeah.
causing him to do this. And yeah, so other times he would find like graves that were recently buried, and these were middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother, and he took the bodies home where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. As you mentioned, like he was trying to create a woman suit, so he become more like his mother and like literally crawl into her skin. He did deny having sex with any of the bodies because he stated that they smelled too bad. But yeah, the idea of becoming his mother obviously seems like a significant motivator here.
The house must have smelled real bad.
You can only imagine. You can only imagine. But you can only imagine that it also must have like become normal to him.
Mm-hmm.
There is this story that when he went to the psychiatric hospital or somewhere, he actually was complaining about how bad it smelled, which is an interesting like contradiction compared to what he was
Hey,
living in.
buddy. Jeez.
So here's the other thing with speculation. He's a very inaccurate reporter, so we have to take everything he says with a grain of salt. There are some speculation that there was a lot of people missing around this time, and that maybe he murdered some of those people, which I assume he probably did.
Probably.
And he just didn't confess to them because he didn't have to, I guess. I don't know. They didn't prove it, so he didn't confess to it. And maybe some of these grave robbings that he admits to, maybe those weren't actual grave robbings, but more murders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he got some of these body parts at his house. The grave robbing probably to him feels less like a sin.
Right. Right. And probably too, on some level, it's much better to spend your years in an asylum than a prison.
For sure. If that's a thought in his head that he can
Yeah.
plead insanity, then he's going to say whatever he can. I mean, that's the other thing. I guess that kind of goes against this idea of how sophisticated he is based on if he's able to pull this off and like really play into that, maybe he is more sophisticated than I'm giving him credit for.
Uh,
Or are you
maybe.
being told what to do? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't
There's this
know.
other really interesting tidbit here that I didn't really put notes in about, but there's this woman who at one point claims that she had like an ongoing relationship with him. Did
Really.
you, I think it's the woman in the show that they show at the very beginning who like
Oh, the
shares
girl who kind
the
of like gives like almost, hey, look,
yeah.
I kind of like that.
So
Yeah.
after all this was like in the news and everything, someone comes forward and says I had an ongoing relationship with Ed. He was nothing like any of these claims. He actually proposed to me and I said no, but it wasn't anything about him. I just couldn't do it at this time. And she claims that they had like this affair of some sorts for years,
Wow.
but
I mean,
then retracts it later and says that it was like, then paints a different picture. And then at some point says none of it was true. So we don't know if
yeah.
any of
There's
that was
always there's
true.
always the strange people that come out there and
Yeah. Did she
like
think this was going to
fans.
get her fame, or was she being honest and then decided, wow, this man's a monster. I don't want to be
Hmm.
associated with him. So no, I'm going to deny it. Or did this, was there some other motivating factor for her to come forward and say anything in the first place? Or did the news just kind of glorify it? I have no idea. I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit to add.
That is an interesting little tidbit. That is. I
So
mean, did he have the same sort of following afterwards, like people wanting to marry
I
him?
I don't think so, as far as I know, but I don't know.
PI.
I never heard any. Well, and also different time. Like he died in
Mm,
1982 or four, so I don't know that like he was in that time frame where
that's
like
true.
the serial killers that we know became. I don't know. I don't know.
Wow.
So
Crazy story though, huh?
crazy story. Pop culture.
Pop culture. I mean, so I mean, we kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but if you, I mean, I guess like I saw Psycho as when I was young. Like the Hitchcock, not the Vince Vaughn, right?
Same
Um,
thing.
but I did see the Vince Vaughn one, obviously.
It's frame for
But
frame. Same thing.
frame for
How
frame,
do you
same
make
thing.
a movie frame for frame, same movie, but it's not as good
Because
or it's
it was
bad
Hitchcock.
in some ways?
Because you what was it? Perkins, who was the original
Anthony
Anthony Perkins?
Perkins.
Yeah, so I mean incredible, right?
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from Vince Vaughn, but incredible. And then the woman too, who's like, is that Jamie Lee Curtis's mom or something like
Yes.
that?
Yep.
So incredible, and the lore and just so there's something about that movie that I appreciate too in the same realm as Jaws, where it keeps a lot of the gruesome. We've gotten away from that so much, where there's like so much gruesome gore and
Oh, you
every
have to show everything now or people don't
yeah.
like it. So yeah.
Yeah. So like to me it's like I don't know, I kind of like appreciated that. Also, so you take that the strange relationship with the mother and the delusions and the sort of auditory hallucinations, he thinks his mother's alive talking to him, coupled with, you know, Wild Bill or Big Bill or whatever it is from like Silence of the Lambs, or even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like the brutality and the skin wearing of that. And like the isolation and the sort of backwoods feel of those three things create like Ed Gein, I think, in my opinion, those are the biggest three.
So Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know, he's clearly has like an into Leatherface clearly has like an intellectual disability.
Hmm.
So they play more into that piece. He
Yes.
also lives in a place where like, but they use chicken. There's like a lot of chicken bones, but they definitely do use the whole idea of like what we're talking about here with all the findings. Like there's
Yes.
bones
Yes.
everywhere in the
Right.
house. The skin, all that stuff. There was Bates Motel. I think kind of really. Did you watch that show at
I
all?
did, yeah.
That really gets into the psyche of Norman Bates with like the mother and stuff like that. And I thought that was I mean, obviously the mother in Bates Motel is no Augusta.
No.
But
And she's like attractive.
it's interesting to think of like how they show the psyche of how like much he is influenced by his mom. And you know, as we were talking about like the voices he might be hearing, the delusions, Jason Voorhees
Mm-hmm.
is
Yes,
being
there you go.
influenced by his mom. She's
Mm-hmm.
saying, kill for mommy, kill for mommy. Like that seems to me like a very borrowed thing. And Buffalo Bill with the skin suit, from Silence of the Lambs, obviously very influenced by this. But I mean, the list goes on and on. There's so many things that are influenced by this. It's just, it's a story that like is horrible, horrendous, but it's so horrible and horrendous. It's like almost meant to be like made for TV and not
It's
a real
like
life
you
story.
couldn't.
It's crazy.
It's one of those things where like you couldn't have written it unless it happened.
Yeah.
You know, just one
And
of those
for
wild tales.
I think it was the first woman he killed. He was telling people, "Oh, she's over by my house. I brought her up to my house or something. She's in my house." He was telling people
I know,
literally,
and they're like, "What?"
and nobody like took it seriously. So it's one of those things that you got to wonder, like the impact that this had on everyone involved. The investigators who had to do all the trips to his house and find this most disgusting and sad and twisted discoveries in the house, but also the townspeople that were either connected to the people or that were connected to him that just brushed him off. And then they must
I
have been
know.
like, oh my God,
Yeah,
we have known about this the whole
it was
time.
under our noses. Yeah. Wow. Yep. Well,
So
I hope that they. I don't know. What do you think about the first episode we talked about? We watched the first episode.
I
Do you think?
enjoyed it. So on my horror social media, I had posted about the show like a while ago, and for whatever reason, right now the post is kind of going, you know, viral. Like people are sharing it like crazy, and I'm seeing everybody's reactions. Like they're writing, captions on the when they're reposting it, and it's the biggest mixed review. And like I said, I think there's people that really want it to be fact based, and then there's other people that are like, oh, this is great acting, this is great writing. So people who seem to like understand that this is going to be more of like a Hollywood style
Mhm.
portrayal. I find it fascinating. I'm taking it for what it is. So, his portrayal of Ed Gein was a little off putting at first when I heard the voice, and then I was like, all right, well,
Maybe,
let's
right?
go for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
just go
yeah.
with it.
Yeah, they had to come up with some kind. Do you think they used research on it for that voice, or do you
I
think?
mean, everything I keep hearing about him is all about how meek and like small he was, and yeah. So
Hmm.
I'm assuming there must be a
All right,
reason they went
well,
with that
we'll
choice.
see how it goes. And that horror um website, or lay that out just in case people want to check that out.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm just talking about my other platform, which is PVD Horror, PVD as in Providence Airport Code Horror,
Mhm.
and yeah, we post about all sorts of horror related things, genre things.
All right, well, I think that's it for us for today.
And Greg, you're recording again on your other
I am, yeah.
podcast. I just saw that the other day.
Yeah, a really good podcast. So that's the name of the podcast, a really good podcast. But that there, you know that Bobby Altoff person?
What is that?
She's just some like weird
Oh,
pop
yeah,
culture.
yeah. Yes, I do know. She's the one that like got really big out of nowhere
Yeah. So
and
her
like
she
super
named her
flat and
podcast
sarcastic.
a really good
Yes.
podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like well, ours was first, and I guess
Was
that's
it
fine.
though?
It was. I checked it. I checked
I
it.
wondered that actually because I did know that there was another one, and I actually I kind of forgot that it was hers. Yeah.
Well, you remember how one time we had people who they didn't like how our
Yes. Yeah.
podcast name was close to theirs, and we had to like we got
Change it.
contacted by lawyers
Yeah.
and
Cease and
had to like change.
desist.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we don't have that kind of clout to cease and desist Bobby Altoff, but yeah, we were definitely first. I checked it out. Published
Interesting.
first
But
on
she
the.
fell off, and people now are very against her.
Oh, see, I don't. I haven't kept up with that.
Oh,
Well,
so
great. Now we're gonna get the bad press for the podcast.
there's this whole thing that like I started to catch on. If you ever want to know any like drama or like pop culture nonsense, X is always the place to
It's the
go, or
place, huh?
formerly Twitter. But yeah, I went down a little rabbit hole because people were posting about her And have you ever heard of this idea of people being like Hollywood transplants or things like
I
that?
yeah, I've heard of people saying, "Is she a plant?" And I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know what the hell that
People
means,
have
but
said that about a number of people. Not that I believe this, but like even like people have referred to like Matt Rife as that, and I'm not saying that that's my opinion. I just heard that in the past. Like people, this idea that like someone goes from like being an unknown to suddenly they're like
super famous.
super famous or just very like shared and everybody seems to be responding to them. And she was one of those people. And I don't know about anything like that, but like it was then they went into like her whole relationship history. She was married at one point, and then suddenly she's like in a bed with Drake in an interview, and then they think that like her and Drake had some kind of. And I'm not here to spread rumors. I don't know the details
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
thing. I'm
yeah.
just saying all the things that I started to uncover when I went down this rabbit hole, and then like people were really like saying some pretty horrendous views on her. So I don't know where things stand now. This was actually a little while ago, but
That's because the newer generations, and which I love, it feels like there's a callback to morality, or like some of these, like they're very like I don't know. It's almost like they're like there's this sense of like doing the right thing again is important.
yeah, they can be contradicting the newer
Yeah,
generation because like at some points it's like what where are your morals, but then they come back around at some
yeah.
point and they kind of like check themselves almost or check everybody else. It's interesting, but it does
Well, the
show.
Coldplay concert.
Yes.
That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
that.
That's what made me
Oh,
be
that's
like,
a
wait a
great point
minute.
actually. Yeah.
The youngest generation, like they're like so loyalty maybe. I think, or
and
like
and
fidelity.
and that idea that like people should work for their status, not just be given it.
Hmm.
And that seemed like a part of like the thing that was really firing people up about the idea that she was a quote unquote transplant was like,
Yeah.
something got her to where she is. And then, for whatever reason, now we're all supposed to just, I think people, as much as we like don't even notice it, sometimes we're told what to think about certain people. But then
Hmm.
there's that idea that once we realize that we're being told what to think, we get really
We don't
mad
like it.
about it. And they were like, no, we're not going to think that anymore. We're
So,
going
because if you ever watch one of her
to,
interviews, it's like, what is this?
she's super dry and sarcastic,
Yeah.
which is
It's
her
like,
whole shtick. But it does get old after a while, I
yeah,
think.
like
Yeah.
immediately old. Oh, you're just gonna be mean to famous people and they're fine with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, whatever.
Interesting. So you guys did an episode about that, or you were just bringing it
No,
up because of the name
no,
of the
I just bring it up
podcast?
because
Okay.
she, although it would be interesting to have an episode about that, but she did just, I thought of the name a really good podcast because I was thinking of someone looking for a podcast and what would they type? I'm looking for a really good podcast. Boom, there it would be. But it
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
No.
Bobby comes up.
That happened to us though. I mean, at first, like we weren't
It did.
popping up right away, and luckily we've had a couple episodes that really seem to do well, and that's caused us to come up frequently now when people look up certain things. So that's just takes time.
Takes time. So again, continue to rate and review.
Yes,
Appreciate
please.
that.
That's the biggest help though. Um, yes. All right. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Apologies for not having an episode last week too. Just scheduling, we weren't able
Scheduling
to
was
sit
tough.
down and record. And as you guys know, the episode before that, we explained why we missed the previous week. There's been a lot going on, especially on Greg's end. So, Greg, thanks for filling everyone in that episode. It seemed like it got a lot of feedback. People appreciated kind of the vulnerability and just you discussing, what was going on. And yeah, so we're back in October. Will be filled with plenty of spooky episodes. So
Stuff. All right.
all right, everybody. Thank you. Have a good day, and we will see you later. Bye bye.